Welcome to the module where we are going to talk about resistance and self-sabotage, something that's really important to know when we are trying to get sober and stay sober. If you've read my book, you know I talk about the 5 pillars of sobriety. And one of those pillars is the pillar of growth. We are all being called to grow. As long as you're human, you are being called to grow beyond where you are now. It is a universal law of life. We are either growing or we are dying. When we had an alcohol problem, we were dying on the inside. So now that we are sober or getting sober, we are being called to grow. In fact, getting sober is, in fact, a call to growth, to be beyond where you are now. Now, growth is great. It's what we're here to do. It happens from the day we're born to the day we die. But here's the thing. When we are called to grow and when we grow, we are always going to meet resistance and fear. So our job is to learn how to navigate and manage resistance so we can honor the call to growth that's inside of us. When we don't understand what's happening, we often self-sabotage. And what self-sabotage is we say we want to do something or we start something. That's what we want to do, that's the plan, and then it all goes wrong, or we stop, or we leave, and it's not because of outside circumstances, it's because we somehow sabotage it. We leave, we create a situation where people maybe have to fire us, or we can't be involved anymore because of something that we've done, and so we self-sabotage, and we can kind of end up in this holding pattern of hearing the call to growth, wanting to go forward and honoring it, but then just self-sabotaging ourselves. And the reason that we often self-sabotage is because of our belief system. We believe we're not good enough, that it's not going to work out for us, that we're going to fail or whatever. And it's our belief system, our limiting beliefs, that cause the self-sabotage. So we get the call to growth, we go forward, we meet resistance, and we just keep going back, and we just end up doing this. So it's an important cycle to break. And I want to explain, you've probably heard me talk about this before, but I want to explain exactly how resistance works. And I want to explain it in the context of having an alcohol problem. So you woke up one day and went, that's it, I don't want to drink, I'm done, oh my God, I'm stopping. And you bought a book or listened to a program, you joined this program, and off you go. And you begin to feel better, you're not drinking, you're not hungover, things are feeling better. What happens is, off we go towards this new place, this new thing that we're being called to, which is sobriety. When that happens, the ego will be paying attention. Now, the ego is a voice that we hear in our head. We all have it. We're not crazy. We're all narrating our own experience of life. The primary purpose of the ego is to keep you safe. And it's done a really good job of that because you're here. But the ego believes the best way to keep you safe is if everything stayed familiar and nothing changed. So the ego doesn't want you going off into this new land of sobriety because we've never been there before. We've been there a few times and visited, and we've not set up home permanently there. How are you going to be safe there? How are you going to navigate Christmas? How are you going to do holidays? What about this wedding you've got coming up? The ego, all it wants to do is for things not to change. But we want things to change, right? We don't want to carry on living the way that we've been living. So immediately resistance is going to occur. Here is the land of sober, where we want to go and set up permanent home, and here is the land of drinking. And this is familiar to the ego, and it just wants to keep us here. So off we go, and then we meet resistance. And resistance shows up, that voice in our head. You've probably heard it. You're not that bad. You could just have a couple of drinks. It's, Friday, it's been a few weeks, you'll be fine, right? And as soon as that voice starts ramping up, you'll begin to feel uncomfortable. And then you're trying to stay sober on willpower, and that's not going to work. So we're just trying to, we just feel so uncomfortable, but we're just determined and trying to keep forward anyway. Well, that voice will always win. It will pull out limiting beliefs. It will do whatever it takes to get you to make a decision to drink so you can go back here. And then what often happens is we make the decision to drink, relief floods in, and then we drink, and then we wake up in exactly the same place. So what happened there is we failed to navigate around resistance. Now, what I want you to think about is that shows up in all areas of our life. And we've all successfully in the past, perhaps haphazardly, managed to navigate resistance. And if you hadn't, you would still be at home in your childhood bedroom. So it will typically show up first day of a new job, first day of a new college course, first day of a new anything. It will show up, right? Because, you know, have you had that experience where you've kind of got bored with your job, it's not very interesting anymore, you don't like it for whatever reason, you apply for this new job, that's the job you want, dream job, can't wait. You get the job, and then like the day of or a few days before, you're like, oh my God, it's like, what have I done? I don't, like, I'm so overwhelmed. You start and you don't understand anything, and people are talking a language that doesn't make sense to you, and you feel completely out of your depth, and you're just like, why did I do this? This is a nightmare, I'm going to fail. It's because it's a new thing. And what will happen, if I ask you to go back and start whatever job you did last, you'd be able to do it because it's familiar. It's because it's unfamiliar. And then more often than not, what happens is it gradually becomes familiar, we gradually figure it out, and it just becomes our new normal. So there have been times when we have navigated around resistance and managed to get through the discomfort and do the new thing. And there are other times where we have maybe sabotaged ourselves in those situations. You know, sometimes we just keep starting new jobs and we think this time's going to be different, but the same thing happens, the discomfort, or we can't deal with people, and we just talk ourselves out of it. Nevertheless, there have been many times where you have managed to navigate around resistance. The thing is, we didn't really know what was happening. We kind of did it haphazardly. You may have used alcohol at different times to deal with the discomfort that you were going through with the new thing that was calling you. So I want to talk about how to navigate through resistance so that we can honor the call to growth that is inside of you. So I want to explain how I do this and how this shows up for me. So one of the ways that it shows up for me is I'm dyslexic, and I wasn't diagnosed until I was actually in university. So I was in my early 20s, and it really changed my life because it just, all of a sudden, everything made sense. I understood why I made the mistakes that I did, and my tutor gave me tools and skills that I use to this day. I've written 3 books that help me with my dyslexic mind to be able to write. So what happens for me is every time I do any kind of formal education, resistance shows up big time. Because in formal education, that's where I kept, you know, in school and in my early experience of college, you know, I was failing and I was making the same mistake, and I could see people like my spelling, and I felt stupid, and I knew I wasn't stupid, but I couldn't understand I couldn't make what they said go in my brain so I could do it. And I would have the same experience over and over and over. So formal education is really frightening for me, and a lot of resistance shows up. Nevertheless, you know, I've put myself through all sorts of qualifications and all of that kind of stuff, and I always go through the same experience. I start and I go, oh my God, none of this makes sense. I don't get it. I'm going to look stupid. And that was my deepest fear, is that this time I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to make a show of myself. I'm going to be really embarrassed. And I want to run and I want to leave. And once I understood what was happening, what I was able to do was acknowledge what was happening. This is resistance showing up because this is a new thing. So it's going to feel like this for a little bit, and then it's going to calm down. The other thing I would tell myself is if you knew everything about this subject, you're a student, so students don't know, they're learning, that's the whole point. If you knew it, you'd be teaching it. You're a student, not knowing is where you're meant to be. The not knowing and the not understanding, I'm just going to trust that as I go along, it will begin to make sense. And that's always been my experience, is over time and with a bit of help, it makes sense and I get it and I can do it. So I tell myself those things, and that kind of brings me, okay, I want to say the resistance, the fear is still there, but it's decreased. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take this one step at a time. The other thing that really helps is chunking it down. So chunking it down into manageable pieces. So I started a course a few years ago, and I hadn't been in formal education for some time, and I started it, and same thing. I was like overwhelmed. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. I don't want to do it. It's the wrong time. And I went and I told my husband, I said, it's not for me, I'm not going to do it. And I had forgotten all this stuff, I'd just forgotten. And he sat me down and said, well, why don't you just do this month? Why don't you just do to the end of the month and then decide from there? Just, you can leave at the end of the month. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. I can do to the end of the month, then I'll leave. That was chunking it down. It kind of went, like, I'm not thinking about exams or qualifying or passing. I'm just going to casually go along every week till the end of the month. And then I'll make my decision, which will probably be, I'll leave. I didn't leave, I finished the course. So that's chunking it down into manageable and giving yourself an exit. Like, I can just see how this goes for a week or a month. I don't have to make any firm commitments. I don't have to do this if I don't want to. I'll just do this, week, month, whatever. And that helps us navigate around the resistance. And then eventually, this new thing that we've gone into where we had this resistance and fear, it becomes our new normal. And the resistance and the fear will go. And then what happens? We get a call to growth and we get a new thing called to us. So when you experience this, I want you to observe yourself with curiosity and not judgment. So don't judge yourself for what you're feeling or thinking. Don't beat yourself up. Oh my God, you're such a failure or loser, or anything like that. Just observe, okay, this is resistance showing up. The first thing is to know what's happening. This is the voice of the ego. It's here to keep me safe. That's why I'm feeling all of this resistance and fear, and it will go in time. One of the things you can say is to that ego voice is, thank you for keeping me safe, but you can be quiet now. Knowing what's happening is enormously helpful, because it's not, I would hear this voice in my head like, oh, you can't do this, you're going to fail. Why did you think this was going to work out? And I would believe it was true. It's not. It's just my ego reflecting my limiting beliefs about myself back to me. So just say things to yourself like, this is resistance and fear showing up. It's showing up because I'm in a growth opportunity right now, and it will feel uncomfortable. It's not the voice of the divine or God or whatever. It's just the ego trying to keep me in the familiar. I'm going to just keep going and I'll see what happens. Having those kind of exit routes is really, really helpful. I'm just going to see, I'm not fully committing. I'm just going to chunk it down, take it bit by bit. By observing, we are increasing our self-awareness. We are not judging. The ego loves judgment. It will feed off of it. So that's something to journal about. Self-awareness is the magic pill here, is being aware of the process that we are in. So when we do this, we are shifting into command of our emotions rather than just reacting to them. So the next thing to do is to create safety. Acknowledge you are safe, and remember the ego wants you to believe that it's not safe to change. So just observe that you are safe, and you recognize that, and you can do this bit by bit. Connect with your body and your breath, the sacred pause. Find a prayer or a mantra that works for you. The one that works for me is be still and know that I am God. That just makes me, but you may be an atheist or have a different belief, and just find a mantra or just something you can say to yourself that just grounds you. So one of the tools that I really love to begin to navigate around the ego is to ask yourself this question. What would a woman or man who loved themselves do next? So we are bypassing any resistance to the ego by asking that question, because we're not saying, I love myself. We're not saying that, because you may not be at that stage yet. We're saying, if I knew a woman who loved herself, what would she do next? Oh, a woman who loved herself, she would go next week and she would listen and whatever, or she would ask for help in the new job or whatever. So ask yourself that question, see what answer comes, and then do that answer. So it bypasses all resistance. What would a woman who loved herself do next? So picture someone that you know who you believe loves themselves and ask, well, what would they in this situation do next? Well, they wouldn't drink. They would ask for help. They would do this. They would do that. And then we have our answer of what we can do next. And the next action could be many things. It could be calling someone. It could be cancelling something. It could be doing nothing. But it's about you being in control and having mastery over what's happening. We are creating space between just reacting to the ego's message. We're shifting into emotional mastery. Now, you're still going to feel these feelings of fear and resistance. They are still going to be there, but they will diminish to a point where it's manageable and you can keep going, and then they will go altogether. It's really important to understand how the ego, resistance, fear all work together, and how we have been stuck in patterns of self-sabotage before. I can see that in myself so often. I would get the call to growth, I would be like, and then I would immediately think, I'm not good enough, I can't do that, and I would sabotage myself. And I would just do that all the time, feeling unfulfilled, not moving forward, never reaching any goals, just stuck in this really unpleasant place that I didn't want to be in. So now you have this knowledge. I want you to look at the handout that goes with this, and I want you to look at where you sabotage yourself. What are some of your patterns? For me, identifying that pattern in education was really helpful navigating as I went forward. But what are yours? What do you do? And just practice some of these things that you can say to the ego when this voice kicks in, so you can begin to bring down these feelings and remain in emotional mastery.